on, guys? Welcome back to Talking About Baseball. I know it's been about a week, but I am back at it. This is one X Factor player for each MLB playoff contender. I have 15 different contenders listed because I think all 15 of these teams have a chance of making the playoffs, and a lot of them already will for sure make the playoffs. But outside of that, an X Factor player for all the MLB contenders, if you didn't know what that means, is pretty much just one guy that isn't like a big star on the team that could definitely help them out, or maybe it is a star on the team that I think could just contribute more on their playoff push. Starting off with the Orioles, I have Grayson Rodriguez. Grayson Rodriguez was supposed to be called up at the very beginning of the year, and he had an injury and was not called up until about May. He was terrible when he was originally called up, but he just got called up in August, and he has been absolutely outstanding since then. He has been absolutely dueling the teams he's been facing, and he has been winning a lot of the time, helping the Orioles maintain their first place position, and I think that he can definitely help them throughout their playoff push. I have yet another pitcher for the team that's trying to chase down the Orioles, and that's the Tampa Bay Rays. Their pitcher will be Tyler Glasnow. The three big starters outside of Glasnow are Drew Rasmussen, Jeffrey Springs, and Shane McClanahan, and they're all out with Tommy John surgery as of right now, and they will definitely not make a return the rest of the season. So Tyler Glasnow is going to have to be a horse and absolutely carry this pitching staff like he has for about the last month now. For the Blue Jays, I have Alejandro Kirk. Kirk is coming off of an all-star season in 2022 when he was the top 5 catcher in baseball, but this year he really hasn't looked that impressive to me. He is hitting about .250 on the season, and his defense is already underwhelming, and his bat is supposed to be picking him up, but he really hasn't been that great this year, and I think if he can pick it up in September and October, well, the Blue Jays can hopefully make the playoffs. We'll see if Kirk can lead them to a playoff berth and potentially lead them to as far as they can possibly go. Next up, I have the Red Sox, and for them, I'm going to go with Trevor Story. The Red Sox are quite a few games out right now, and I don't think they will make it, but one big guy that I think will help them is Trevor Story. He was signed a few years ago, right before Xander Bogaerts left. Story really hasn't been that good for Boston so far, but he recently came back from an injury, and he's looked alright so far, but I think a big help from him would be if he just starts playing really good, and I think that'll really help the Red Sox offense to push them to a playoff spot. Next up, we have the Minnesota Twins, and I have Carlos Correa for them. Carlos Correa was signed by the Giants in the offseason, but that deal was canceled right before he was supposed to have a press conference due to medical concerns with his foot. Same thing happened with the Mets after they offered him $20 million less, and then he ended up coming back to the Minnesota Twins for way less money, and he has looked absolutely terrible this year. Although lately he has started to heat up, and if he can continue that, Carlos Correa has been one of the best players in the playoffs in his career, and the Twins are definitely going to win their weak division this year, so we'll see if he can come alive in the postseason. For the Guardians, I have Lucas Giolito. I think the Guardians have pretty much no chance at making the playoffs at this point, but if there's one guy that I think could really help them, that'll be Lucas Giolito and the rest of their pitching staff. Giolito was recently claimed off waivers from the Angels in a trade that might go down as one of the worst in history, as the Angels traded away their number 2 and 3 prospects and just put both of the pitchers that they got in the deal on waivers, and both were picked up by the Guardians along with Matt Moore. Lucas Giolito was extremely unimpressive for the Angels, and that is why they put him on waivers, but I think he could definitely help out the Guardians in their potential push to the playoffs, although I don't think they will make it. For the Mariners, I have Teoscar Hernandez. The Mariners have absolutely catapulted themselves with a team record 21 wins in August, and they did not even win 21 wins in 1 month when they tied the win record for a single season with 116 wins. The most games they won that season was 20 in a month, and the Mariners just went absolutely off that in August. Julio Rodriguez raised his batting average almost 25 points, and another guy that contributed way more in August was Teoscar Hernandez. I think he can definitely help them throughout the playoffs, as he hurt them in the playoffs last year as they beat the Blue Jays. Teoscar Hernandez was one of the Blue Jays' best hitters in that series that they ended up losing, and the Mariners now hold first place in the AL East and the 2 seed in the American League. For the Rangers, I have Max Scherzer. He's been dealing with some arm issues lately and is currently day-to-day, but Max Scherzer has been amazing ever since he joined the Rangers, but the Rangers really have not. After the trade deadline, the Rangers put out a 7-game winning streak, but since then they have looked absolutely atrocious. Their pitchers have not been all that great lately, including Jordan Montgomery, but one guy who's been great ever since they acquired him is Max Scherzer, and I do think he will keep it up for the rest of the year. And Max Scherzer has just looked very good for the Rangers, and I think that can definitely help them and just give them some life and energy, and hopefully they can retain their spot above the Blue Jays for the playoffs. For the Astros, I have Christian Javier. A lot of people had him as their dark horse Cy Young candidate, but he will definitely not be winning that this year unless he throws a perfect game in all of his last starts. Christian Javier has been pretty underwhelming this year for a really solid Astros team, but he actually threw a no-hitter in the World Series last year. Only a handful of pitchers can say that they've done that, and only a handful of pitchers can say that they've thrown 2 no-hitters in 1 year, which is what Christian Javier did last year. I think Javier has definitely been worse this year than last year, but I think he can still be a big playoff helper for the Astros, and I think he will definitely help with their push, even though they will most likely make it, hopefully contribute while they are in the playoffs. For the Braves, I have Max Fried. He recently came back from the injured list, and I think he will definitely help the Braves out a lot on the pitching side. They've definitely been hurt by injuries a little bit with their young stars like Max Fried and Mike Soroka. Ever since Max Fried came back, he has just looked absolutely amazing. He has been back to his top starter self, and he will be back for the Braves playoff push. And the Braves are the best team in baseball right now, and I don't really see a team that can stop them as of now. For the Phillies, I have Bryce Harper. We all know what happened last year. The Phillies were the 6th seed, and they went all the way to the World Series, and Bryce Harper was definitely the biggest part of that. He absolutely went off in the 2022 playoffs. He hit a lot of key home runs, especially his one against the Padres, that pretty much sent them to the World Series. And even though they lost in the World Series, Bryce Harper is one of the best playoff performers in Major League Baseball. For the Marlins, I have Jake Burger. The Marlins are not looking like they're going to make it, although they are hot right now. Jake Burger has been one of the biggest reasons they are currently hot. Burger was acquired from the White Sox, which I'm not really sure why the White Sox traded him, although it was definitely a fair trade by both sides. And Burger has looked very good for the Marlins so far. I think he will be a key contributor for the Marlins if they want to make the playoffs. For the Brewers, I have Adrian Hauser. Adrian Hauser is definitely not the biggest star pitcher on the Brewers, as that would be Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff. But Adrian Hauser has actually looked very good in his most recent starts. He hasn't allowed a ton of runs in a while, and he has just been a very solid pitcher for Milwaukee. And I think he will definitely help them if the Brewers want to keep their division lead over my Chicago Cubs. And speaking of my Chicago Cubs, their X factor is Javier Assad. Javier Assad in his last 2 starts has gone 15 combined innings and has not allowed a run. He has looked absolutely outstanding lately, and he's just been the ace of the Cubs lately, even though Justin Steele has been there as well. Him and Steele have definitely been the best 2 pitchers the last week or so for the Cubs, and Marcus Stroman could also be an X factor for their playoff push if he can come back healthy and good, as when he went out with an injury, he looked absolutely terrible his last few starts. For the Dodgers, I have Michael Busch. They've been going through a few injuries throughout the year, like losing Gavin Lux for the whole season, but Michael Busch has looked quite well recently after being called up for a second time. He just hit a home run the other night, and I think Michael Busch can definitely help them out if he can start being a big contributor to the Dodgers' offense. For the Diamondbacks, I have Merrill Kelly. Kelly has looked absolutely amazing in his last few starts, and even though they also have Zach Gallen, who just had a bad start against the Orioles, I think Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen can lead this rotation to a solid playoff push, but they don't really have any other key amazing starters in their rotation, and that's what I think could be the downfall of the Diamondbacks. And finally, for the Giants, I have Alex Cobb, another guy who just had a pretty rough start, but I think he could definitely help the Giants in their playoff push, as they are currently tied with the Diamondbacks for that 3rd wildcard spot, and that's going to be a good race to watch throughout the rest of this season. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time that I was talking about baseball, and I'll see you next time where I'll most likely be talking about baseball. Bye.